Welcome to Aquatic Biology. Today, we are diving into one of the most fascinating and alien environments on our planet, the deep sea. Imagine trying to survive in a world where the sun never shines, the water is freezing cold, and the weight of the ocean pressing down on you feels like 100 elephants standing on your chest. If a human were to travel down there without a heavy, reinforced submarine, the immense pressure would crush them instantly. Yet, despite these terrifying conditions, a bizarre and beautiful array of animals call this place home. We are going to explore the incredible biological superpowers, or adaptations, that allow these creatures to not just survive, but thrive in the abyss. To understand these creatures, we first need to understand their home. The deep sea is divided into several zones, primarily the bathypelagic, abyssopelagic, and hadopelagic zones. As we descend into these depths, the environment becomes incredibly hostile. The defining characteristics of these zones are extremely hydrostatic pressure, near freezing temperatures, and a complete absence of solar light. Because there is no sunlight, there is no plant life, which means food resources are extremely limited. Any organism living here must be perfectly tuned to handle these exact physical challenges. It is a world of absolute darkness and crushing weight, requiring a complete biological overhaul compared to the shallow water marine life we are used to seeing near the surface. Now that we understand the harsh conditions of the deep sea, let us look at how animals physically adapt to them. Anatomically, these creatures look bizarre for very practical reasons. To survive the crushing pressure, many have evolved reduced skeletal structures and flabby muscles, resulting in bodies made of squishy, gelatinous materials that simply cannot be crushed. Furthermore, because food is so incredibly scarce in the dark depths, they cannot afford to let a meal escape. To solve this, they possess enormous jaws lined with inward-pointing teeth, acting like a trap. Many also feature highly expandable stomachs, allowing them to swallow prey that is actually larger than they are. When a meal finally comes along, their anatomy ensures they make the absolute most of it. Beyond their physical shapes, these organisms have also completely re-engineered their internal chemistry. Physiologically, deep-sea creatures rely on specialized enzymes that are uniquely structured to continue functioning under extreme high pressure, where normal proteins would simply collapse. Because they live in a food-scarce environment, they also maintain extremely slow metabolic rates, conserving every ounce of energy they can. Perhaps the most famous biochemical adaptation is bioluminescence. Since there is no sunlight, these animals create their own light through internal chemical reactions. This biological glow acts as a beacon in the void, allowing them to communicate, camouflage themselves, or lure in curious prey and potential mates in the pitch-black ocean. You might wonder why we spend so much effort studying creatures we rarely see. Understanding these deep-sea adaptations is incredibly important for several reasons. First, it teaches us about the absolute limits of life on Earth, showing us how biology can conquer seemingly impossible physical barriers. This knowledge directly fuels the field of astrobiology. When scientists look for life in extreme environments on other planets or moons, like the deep subsurface ocean on Jupiter's moon Europa, they use our deep ocean as a model. Furthermore, the unique enzymes these organisms produce are harvested for medical research, genetic engineering, and cellular imaging. Finally, as human activities like deep-sea mining and climate change begin to impact these fragile ecosystems, understanding how these animals survive is crucial for creating effective conservation strategies.
To truly appreciate what these organisms are adapting to, we must understand the physical forces at play, starting with hydrostatic pressure. As you go deeper into the ocean, the weight of the water above you increases, creating a crushing downward force. This pressure increases linearly and dramatically with every meter you descend. This physical reality dictates why deep-sea fish look so different from surface fish. Most surface fish have air-filled swim bladders to control buoyancy. However, deep-sea organisms have evolved without them. If they had air spaces in their bodies, the immense weight of the water column would compress the air and crush them instantly. Instead, their tissues are mostly water, which is incompressible.
This physical reality of crushing weight can be quantified using the hydrostatic pressure formula. The formula states that P equals P0 plus rho times G times H. Let us break down what each symbol means. The variable P represents the total pressure experienced by the organism at a specific depth, measured in pascals. P0 stands for the atmospheric pressure at the surface of the ocean, which is the weight of the air above the water. The Greek letter rho represents the density of seawater, which is approximately 1,025 kilograms per cubic meter. The letter G is the acceleration due to gravity. Finally, H represents the depth in meters below the surface. As the depth H increases, the total pressure P increases dramatically. Now that we have our formula, let us apply it to a real deep-sea creature. Imagine a gulper eel living in the bathypelagic zone at a depth of 2,000 meters. We want to calculate the total hydrostatic pressure it experiences. We are given the surface pressure as 101,325 pascals, the density of seawater, and gravity. We substitute these values into our equation. Following the order of operations, we first multiply the density, gravity, and depth. This gives us 20,090,000 pascals, which is the pressure exerted by the water column alone. Finally, we add the surface atmospheric pressure. The total pressure is over 20 million pascals. This is roughly 200 times the pressure we feel on land, perfectly explaining why the eel needs a water-filled, gelatinous body to survive. We have seen how pressure shapes these animals, but the second major physical challenge is the absolute absence of sunlight. As light travels downward through the water column, it is absorbed and scattered by the water molecules, causing it to fade incredibly fast. This lack of solar energy means no photosynthesis can occur, which is why food is so extremely scarce. The darkness also drives fascinating visual adaptations. Many deep-sea creatures have evolved highly sensitive, enlarged eyes to capture whatever faint traces of light might exist, whether from the surface or from other glowing animals. Understanding exactly how fast this light disappears helps us realize why bioluminescence is an absolute necessity for survival in the deep ocean. The exact way light fades as it travels downward is described mathematically by the Beer-Lambert law of light attenuation. The formula is I sub z equals I sub 0 times e raised to the power of negative k times z. Here, I sub z represents the intensity of light at a specific depth z, measured in watts per square meter. I sub 0 is the initial light intensity at the ocean's surface. The mathematical constant e is the base of the natural logarithm. The variable k is the light attenuation coefficient, which tells us how quickly the specific body of water absorbs and scatters light. Because the depth z is in the negative exponent, as depth increases, the light intensity decreases exponentially, dropping off incredibly fast.
Let us see this exponential decay in action. We want to determine how much sunlight reaches a deep-sea anglerfish at a depth of 1,000 meters. We assume the surface light intensity is 1,000 watts per square meter, and the attenuation coefficient is 0.04 per meter. We plug these values into our formula. First, we simplify the exponent by multiplying the attenuation coefficient by the depth, giving us -40. The value of e raised to the -40 is an incredibly small number, practically indistinguishable from 0. When we multiply this by the initial surface light, we get approximately 4.2 times 10 to the -15th watts per square meter. This is absolute pitch-black darkness, proving mathematically why the anglerfish must create its own light to hunt. Let us bring all these concepts together in this diagram. On the vertical axis, we see the ocean depth increasing from the surface down to 4,000 meters. Notice the two physical forces we calculated. The curve shows light intensity decreasing exponentially, hitting absolute zero around 1,000 meters. Meanwhile, the straight line shows hydrostatic pressure increasing linearly and dramatically as we go deeper. Right in the middle, at 2,000 meters, we see our anglerfish. Because it lives in the high pressure zone, it has a gelatinous body. Because it lives below the light curve, it uses a bioluminescent lure. And because food is scarce in this void, it has an expandable stomach. This diagram perfectly illustrates how the physical environment directly dictates biological evolution. We have covered a lot of ground today, so let us review the key takeaways. First, we learned that the crushing hydrostatic pressure of the deep ocean forces animals to evolve water-filled, gelatinous bodies without air bladders to prevent being compressed. Second, we saw mathematically how the complete disappearance of sunlight drives the need for bioluminescence, allowing creatures to communicate and hunt in the pitch black. Finally, because this darkness prevents photosynthesis, food is incredibly scarce, meaning these animals must possess massive jaws and expandable stomachs to ensure no meal ever escapes. Together, these deep-sea organism adaptations are nature's brilliant biological solutions to the most extreme environment on Earth, showing us just how resilient life can be.